Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have a look at the latest from the live radar, run through the weather warnings as we do have rain and wind warnings issued as we're going to remain very unsettled over the course of the next few days. We'll have a look at the UKV as well, have a look at all of that precipitation and wind as well, and of course we'll have a look at the temperatures. It's remaining fairly cool. The upper air temperatures are actually around average, but with all the precipitation around, the westerly winds, it's making it feel quite cold towards the surface. Sort of 2 metre temperatures are still going to be pretty chilly this week, even though it is a generally westerly flow. As we look in the longer range, as we head into early December, we'll see on the GFS, GM, ECWF and the ensembles, we're expecting the month to start colder than average. Now, whether it's bitterly cold and snowy, we can't say for certain, or whether it's just a frosty inversion under a higher pressure system, then that could be another situation as well. So we'll have to see exactly how it does play out. But today, all the longer range models are suggesting higher pressure shifting over the top of us and to our north, and allowing air masses to move in from the north or the east. Again, how brisk those air masses are, where they exactly come from, will decide whether it's just colder than average, frosty, foggy, or whether we see something very cold and potentially wintry as well. So stay tuned for the second half of the video to see what the models are indicating for the start of December and officially the start of winter. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well. The link's in the description. So if you start on the live radar, you can see we're actually in a slightly drier spell at the moment after a huge amount of rainfall yesterday. We'll look at the 24-hour past precipitation totals, and you can see we saw a huge amount of rain in some areas over the course of yesterday and last night, and even to the early hours of this morning. We do still have some bands of precipitation in southwest England and some showers into parts of Scotland, but most areas are dry. A bit of a lull at the moment, but heavier rain will be moving in from the west over the course of the next 24 hours, so it is not going to be lasting all too long. If you look at the 2 metre temperatures as of around midday, you can see it's quite cold across Scotland. A lot of lighter blues there, indicating low single digits, if not towards freezing over the higher ground. Further southwards across most of England, Wales, Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, we're more mixing between blues and yellows, sitting around that sort of 8 to 10 degree mark. So a lot cooler than we've had over the past few weeks and most of October and November, but still generally average to maybe only slightly, or just generally around average really, feeling slightly below average with the wind out there and any of those showers. Again, if we put on those past 24-hour precipitation totals, again this is radar estimates, so it's not going to be exactly what we've seen, but you can see some areas have seen a ridiculous amount of rain. Look across the North Midlands into Yorkshire, Northwest England, yellows appearing here, so that's up towards sort of 2 inches of rain, and just widespread darker greens appearing, showing a lot of rain has fallen. And of course, this is only the last 24 hours, so Scotland's actually been spared quite a bit in the last 24 hours, but previous 24 hours and the previous days to that, they got absolutely smashed by rain. So yeah, a lot of rainfall has fallen, and it's going to continue over the next few days. If you go over to the weather warnings, you can see today we do have 2 yellow warnings in force for Scotland from midday today until 11 p.m. this evening, where heavy rain and showers bring a chance of some flooding and disruption. Those will be precipitation spiralling in off the North Sea. Again, 20 to 25 millimetres could fall. Again, actually not that much in itself, but it's because it's falling onto such saturated ground and could bring localised flooding, especially to low-lying roads. High likelihood, lower end of the impact matrix. Go to tomorrow, we have a yellow rain warning for parts of eastern parts of Northern Ireland from 5 a.m. until 10 a.m. Heavy rain may lead to some travel disruption. You can see these are only 5-hour warnings, and again only 20 to 25 millimetres, which is a lot of rain, but it's not exceptional. It's because it's falling onto such saturated ground. That's why we're seeing so many of these yellow weather warnings. And again, high likelihood, lower end of the impact matrix. And if we do move to southwest England, we have a rain and wind warning from 3 a.m. until 8 a.m. A short spell of heavy rain and gusty winds may cause some travel disruption. Again, another spell of wet, windy weather will arrive across southern parts of Wales and southwest England in the early hours of Wednesday. For many, this will be fairly normal autumnal conditions, but for a few, there could be a short interlude with torrential rain and very gusty winds. Again, high likelihood, lower end of the impact matrix. So yeah, could be some very unsettled weather over the course of the next couple of days. And again, mostly due to the fact that it's just been persistent unsettled weather, meaning even just a heavy burst of rain could cause some flooding in some areas because the ground is so saturated and rivers are swelled up. If you go over to the UKV and have a look at those precipitation charts over the course of the next 5 days, you can see those showers spiralling in at the moment, sort of degrading away through this afternoon, and then you see that heavier rain across parts of eastern Scotland pepping up over the course of the afternoon. As this video is probably being published, you can see heavier rain lines sort of building there. So that's why we've got a yellow warning, even though it doesn't actually look too severe. It's because it's quite heavy rain falling in a very short period of time over a very small area, of course, which has saturated ground. As we head through this evening, you can see heavy rain pushing in from the southwest, torrential precipitation for some there, look like a little bit of squally features, and that's where we could see some of that torrential rain pushing in most so overnight into rush hour period for further eastern and northern areas, for eventually moving out into the North Sea for Wednesday afternoon, and by the evening clearing away, and then just seeing a lot of showers tumbling in off the Atlantic. Beyond that, as we head through Wednesday evening, we continue to see those showers pushing in from the west, and as we head into sort of Thursday afternoon, you can see that we have more precipitation spiraling in, a bit of another squally feature there, and eventually just a lot of heavy showers tumbling in, as I said, off the Atlantic, continuing to cause issues, maybe some snowfall over the high ground of Scotland, and through Friday looks like another little lull there, but Wednesday and Thursday looks very unsettled once again, and then as we head into Saturday, another huge band of precipitation moving in, torrential rain coming up from the southwest, giving another deluge for many through Saturday into early hours of Sunday for areas further east. So yeah, continuing to look very unsettled over the next 5 days. Yes, there will be some drier spells at times, but nothing too significant really, with precipitation very close by at all times really. If you look at the wind gusts, you can see it's going to be gusty pretty much all the time, but I wanted to have a look at why we've got that weather warning in the southwest over the course of tomorrow morning. So you can see when that rain band eventually arrives around the early hours of the morning, you can see the gusting winds up to around 50-60 miles per hour, maybe peaking around 70 in a couple areas. So again, only really probably along that squall line feature. But towards the southern flank of this little low that's moving in, that's where we could see these severe winds. But again, I'm not expecting anything much above 60 or 70, maybe the isolated 75 or 80 in the squally band of precipitation. Eventually winds do die down, but it's going to remain fairly blustery all week really. If you put on the 2 meter max temperatures, you can see this afternoon temperatures are going to be peaking in around that sort of 8 to 10 degree mark, maybe more towards sort of 7 or 8 degree part, and across Scotland hardly above freezing in some areas. Overnight tonight, those temperatures will drop away quite a lot in the north and the east, where we still have clearer skies, down towards freezing, and into tomorrow afternoon, we can see those temperatures potentially rising once again up towards that sort of 8 to 10 degree mark. Again, nothing particularly great, but again, around average this time of year. You can see that sort of 7, 8, 9, maybe slightly higher in a few spots for Wednesday afternoon. And into the early hours of Thursday, once again, mid to low single digits, could be slightly cold across Scotland. And into Thursday afternoon, we can see those temperatures once again rising to maybe 10 to 12 degrees, so slightly milder there, perhaps because we've got a slightly more tilt to the southwesterly there with the unsettled weather. And then you'd expect overnight to Thursday, you see those temperatures not dropping all too low, still maybe 3 or 4 degrees, but not towards freezing because of the milder air masses. And by Friday afternoon, again, 8 to 10 degrees, and then similar into Saturday, overnight temperatures down towards the low single digits, and by the afternoon, once again, 8 to maybe 12 degrees, so slightly milder, but again, nothing particularly unsettling. You can actually see the early hours of Sunday very mild. It's a very warm sector, does push up from the southwest. But this is the next 5 days. It's the longer term as we head towards the last day or two of November and the start of December, where it's looking highly likely we turn drier, but also a lot colder as well. Not only daytime temperatures will be dropping down potentially towards mid to low single digits widely, overnight temperatures, if we did see this high pressure system move in, regardless of how cold those upper air temperatures do get, it will be very cold overnight, a lot of frosts, a lot of fog. So if we do go over to the GFS and see what that is showing over the next few weeks, you can see the low pressure tumbling in off the Atlantic at the moment, continuing to keep us very unsettled. And you can see towards the weekend we get that southwesterly push, and that's why it's turning slightly milder, cutting off those frosts to maybe 11 or 12 degrees into the weekend. But higher pressure does build over the top of us for the last couple of days of November, and we start pulling in the easterly wind. Now, some of the runs over the last sort of 24 hours or 2 days really have produced much more brisk easterly winds. This GFS only pulls a slack easterly, and that's why there's a lot of uncertainty with it, because depending on how strong that easterly wind is, will create colder conditions if it's stronger, dragging colder air in out of the Arctic. But if it's only a slack easterly, like we're seeing here, it would generally be cold, but no real winteriness associated with it, so it'd be a much more settled, colder pattern. And you can see right towards the end of the run, low pressure trying to climb around the low, so around the high, but the high pressure is holding on and continuing us in an easterly flow. Now, if you run it back all the way to when that cold air mass starts to arrive in around sort of 6 days' time, or the high pressure arrives with the cold air mass, you can see generally around freezing, maybe slightly colder in the southeast upper air temperatures. And again, it's under the inversion. Under the high pressure, we'll see an inversion, which means even though there are slightly milder upper air temperatures there in the north and the west, it would still be producing very cold conditions. You can see that continuing in the longer term, the -5 isotherms involved, potentially even mixing maybe the -10 if it got a little bit more of a stronger easterly, all the way to the end of the run. And again, it doesn't look like anything too exceptional, but it really would be cold towards the surface. If we do run it back and put on the potential equivalent temperatures, you can see all the darker blues just dominating over the top of us all the way through the first week to 10 days of December. Yes, slightly milder conditions could arrive at times, but I suspect those might get us towards the mid to high single digits instead of the low single digits. But it would be really quite cold under that higher pressure. Again, if we go to the United Kingdom view and look at the 2 metre temperatures, look at that. Overnight temperatures widely below freezing, daytime temperatures struggling at sort of 5 or 6 degrees for many, remaining very cold. Look at that, midday on the 6th of December. Not incredibly cold air mass, but look at that, 2 to 5 degrees widely through central England. And again, these are not particularly high resolution, so it'll be colder than that in more localised areas. And of course, fog lingering could stop it getting above freezing. And you look at the upper air temperatures at this point on the GFS run, and you can see they're nothing too exceptional, around -4 or -5 at 850 HPA. Probably just about cold enough to maybe get some wintry precipitation, but you wouldn't think this is anything exceptional. But towards the surface, it really would be quite cold. So that is something we do need to keep an eye on, regardless of how cold it actually gets at the upper air temperatures. With this high pressure pattern, it would be cold at the surface regardless, because of a potential inversion. If we go to the GEM, see how that does compare. Again, very unsettled conditions dominating over the next sort of 5 days as we head into the weekend and next week. High pressure built in, initially trying to get to our north and our east, try to pull an easterly in. Actually, the GEM today really struggles. It keeps us under higher pressure, but eventually the low pressure from the Atlantic will try and win out, and that cold air mass, just a couple hundred miles to our east, never quite gets in. So the GEM run, a little bit pessimistic with it today, but the reason why I'm definitely more slanted toward the higher pressure pattern is because that's what we're seeing from the majority of the models at the moment, and definitely what we're seeing from the ensembles as well, which have definitely shifted towards a colder pattern. Only slightly colder than average, but nevertheless colder and drier. So GM today, more westerly, trying to get that high pressure up, but not quite winning out. But of course, we do find sometimes the models do underestimate high pressure blocks. So that's, of course, another reason why we'd probably go on the side of higher pressure. If you do go have a look at the ECMWF, see how that does compare over the next couple of weeks. You can see low pressure running in off the Atlantic at the moment, high pressure building in around that day 6, day 7 range, and actually it builds more out into the Atlantic initially before pulling an easterly wind in at day 10. Again, this would be quite cold. You see quite a cold air mass just across the near constant. Again, this would be similar to the GFS, with more of an inversion pattern, but of course runs yesterday were showing more of a brisk easterly, so it is sort of flip-flopping a little bit, but the pattern of high pressure over the top of us extending towards Scandinavia, giving us easterly winds, does continue to look incredibly likely. And there is very cold air just across Scandinavia and parts of Russia, Eastern Europe, that could be dragged our way if we did get that high pressure really going. So yeah, looking quite cold in the longer term. Again, temperature deviation only sort of 2 to 4 degrees below average, but of course, towards the surface, that can cause quite a cold pattern with an inversion, as I said. If you do see this well emphasised on the ensembles, these are the GFS ensembles, you can see generally around average over the next week, maybe slightly above average, as we hit all the last couple of days of November and start of December. You can see generally we're a couple of degrees below average, and quite a few runs getting well below average, down towards that -4 to -6 degree range. Again, nothing completely out of the ordinary. It is cold, a lot colder than average, but it's nothing exceptional, but it would produce much drier and colder conditions. There are still some very mild runs, but we are definitely now seeing a shift of the ensemble members towards a colder than average start of December and drier as well. You can see this well by having a look at the precipitation initially, see lower precipitation in the longer term, and you can look at the sea level pressure definitely rising in the longer term. Again, look at the dew points, you can see the longer term, yes, dropping more from sort of 5, 6, 7 degrees down towards 1 or 2. Again, symbolic of a drier, colder air mass from the east. And again, the 2-meter temperatures dropping considerably towards the first week of December. Highs more around 6 or 7 degrees, lows would be a lot lower than it's showing here, because of course the ensemble members do struggle with detail, and of course an inversion is quite a detailed sort of pattern, and again would very much only be sort of picked up in the 2-meter temperatures by the ensemble members, probably within sort of the 5-day time frame. So we can't rely on those overnight temperatures too much, but there will likely be very cold conditions overnight there. So yeah, looking very interesting. And of course, if we have a look at the ECMWF ensemble members for the longer term, again, quite a few ensemble members going below average, slightly more around the first day of December, peaking maybe slightly above average, but still we've got definitely a trend of more towards that colder than average pattern, especially in the longer term. Again, we'll have to see exactly what happens, but from looking at the models over the last sort of 48 hours or so, looking at the ensembles and where they're trending, I definitely would go on the side of a colder than average start to December. Again, whether it will be any wind shifts around with it, we can't say for certain until we get the exact pressure pattern sort of positioned and decided, but generally high pressure looks like it will build in to over the top of us, if not to our north, and try and pull in an easterly wind. A slack easterly, an inversion, colder conditions towards the surface, a brisk easterly, long fetched easterly, then it could produce cold, but also maybe something more wintry as well. So I have to see what happens in the longer term, but I definitely do think we're now seeing the signs of definitely some colder and drier conditions to start December. So anyway, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.